What if I were to tell you that using AI tools is actually making you dumber, physically and actually measurably? Would you say, nah, bruh, Savior Altman is going to make us all more utopiazed? Or would you say, yeah, no kidding, Captain Obvious? Your brain on ChatGPT, an absolutely fantastic reference to a commercial from the 80s. Future me, go find that and put that here, please.
Okay, last time. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
Neat. It seems to me these people's main lens they were viewing this through was to strictly find out, as the title implies, like what does using large language models, specifically in an educational setting, what does that do to your brain, right? Does that have physical effects, physiological effects? And they can actually map, brain stuff. You can monitor signals. They have fun little hats with little doodads and beep bop boops all over them, and they designed a very interesting experiment. They made three groups, and each group was given a tool set parameter, right? You had a brain only group, so that's no internet, no AI. You had the search engine group, right? Only used the search engine. And then you had the AI only group. And each of these groups was tasked with writing an essay on a specific topic or given a choice of topics. And while they wrote these essays, they attached these wonderful little beep bop boopy helmets to them. And they mapped and they recorded the way that the brain was operating during these different, using the different tools, sort of comparing things. And the results are actually, at the risk of sounding glib, if not slightly pedantic, I'm going to go ahead and I'll say the results are not shocking. The old expression, use it or lose it, there's a little kernel of something in there. So if you're not using your brain to think critically, if you're using your brain to copy and paste slop pasta, your brain is not going to be fit. So the way that the experiment was structured was they took a group of people and broke them up into three groups. Those three groups were tasked with writing essays on a number of topics. Those three groups were given a specific set of tools that they were supposed to use during their essay writing. Group one was going to be brain only, right? Use your mind. Group two was going to be search engine only, right? Remember that? And group three is going to be LLM. These are the AI guys. And each person, while writing their essay, will be fitted with a lovely EEG helmet or hat, fitting that has tons and tons of electrodes, so they can use that to map the signals of your brain. So while you're writing this and while you're engaging with X tools, they can see what your brain does. I feel like that's a great way to go about it too. It takes a lot of the speculation out of these types of things, which is nice because it's always nice to have data to back up something that you intrinsically kind of know. So moving on, what I'd like to point out, one of the first things that they did find was that the LLM group had a considerably difficult time quoting from the papers or the essays that they had written. 83.3 actually, 83% failed to provide a correct quotation, whereas only 11% in the search engine and brain only groups had the same problem. So without reading too much into that, I don't think that necessarily is an indicator that you are more dumber. I think that just implies that the people who use large language models to write papers, write essays, complete tasks, have a strong tendency to not process or engage with the material in any way, let alone necessarily a meaningful manner that would allow you to sort of process and store that information. So this group not being able to accurately quote the papers that they turned in is not surprising, right? So that is just an observation they had, and I think that's a separate conversation about what that could mean for things getting done, efficiency, the most basic minimum level of competency. One of the initial findings, and this isn't necessarily a conclusion, this is an observation based on data. The large language model group, when they were performing their task, creating their essay, the part of their brain associated with creative ideation, as they say here, that those parts of the brain were significantly less active. Now, that in and of itself doesn't mean that you're breaking your brain. It just means you're using less of your brain. But if we're going to go back to the old use it or lose it adage, I'd say that potentially very troubling. An important concept that the researchers here are putting forward is something called cognitive debt. It sort of implies that if you don't use your brain, if you're not developing those parts of your brain, when it comes time to actually use those parts of your brain, you're going to have a bad time. You're actually creating a sort of deficit that you're going to have trouble making up for later. And I find that to be very interesting. They do go on to say more specifically about how the brain functions, how people who went from using a large language model and then on their fourth essay assignment were then given the task of using their brain only, it showed that those pathways that for planning and execution of this were actually less developed and had to work much harder because fewer pathways, less efficiency, kind of going back to that concept of cognitive debt. Very interesting. Again, really nice to have data backing up or supporting something that you kind of felt that you understood. Well, what happens when we start putting AI teachers in schools at different ages? How does it affect developing minds, middle schoolers, high schoolers, college students? So one of the things that they go on to say, and I think this is a nice and balanced, sort of a based, if you will, viewpoint. It says, and again, in regard to AI in education, it said it would be important to explore hybrid strategies in which AI handles routine aspects of writing, such as composition, while core cognitive processes, idea generation, the organization, critical revision will all remain user driven. So during the early phases of education, full neural engagement seems to be essential for developing a robust writing network in your mind, right? Pathways make your brain work. By contrast, in later practice phases, selective AI support could reduce extraneous cognitive load and thereby enhance efficiency without undermining your ability to, be a thinking human being, which makes sense. I don't really have an issue with AI helping you to maybe organize an essay that you've written. That's fine. Essay structure sucks. You can take your 5-paragraph supporting thesis opening statement and the researchers said that what they noticed is that the LLM to brain group repeatedly focused on a narrower set of ideas. We can see that in AI across the board, right? Image AI, writing AI, they all sort of the weights, they all sort of skew towards a central place where everything sort of gets samey. And that's one thing that the researchers sort of find here. Important to hang a lantern on the fact that they said that this conclusion is preliminary. And because these are smart people, they know that the more data, the larger sample size that you have, the longer of a study that you do, well, the more accurate your information is going to get. If there's anything that AI bros certainly know, it's that the more data you have, the more winnier you be. Another part of the cognitive debt hypothesis is that because of reliance on large language models, becoming accustomed to not engaging those critical thinking aspects of your brain, those critical thinking aspects of your brain, those capacities, those pathways become less developed. So you start to lose the ability to think critically. Now, they don't say this, but I think also there's a level of conditioning there where you're conditioning yourself to just take whatever this, the slop generator gives you and just take it for what it is. Like, okay, this is fine. This sounds good, and you paste it in. You're sort of conditioning yourself to just accept, shallow or potentially biased viewpoints. When participants reproduce suggestions without evaluating their accuracy or relevance, they not only forfeit any ownership of these ideas, but also you risk internalizing shallow, biased perspectives. I mean, talking about not having any sort of ownership over any of the ideas that your AI slot machine spits out. We saw this in the most egregious case recently where the the RFK Jr.'s health department put out an AI generated slop report that cited lots of non existent things and was just largely unintelligible. This is the problem. We are getting lazier and lazier, and these are all bigger and sort of larger potential problems that we can discuss. But again, these are not the focuses of this study. It is noteworthy that the energy cost of the large language models versus the search engine only, they didn't put brain only in there because, was 10 times more. The LLMs used 10 times more energy and produced, well, I'm not going to say 10 times worse results, but arguably worse results. Before I go, I do have a few thoughts of my own that I'd like to share. I think you have to take a step back and look at all this. AI is just one tentacle of the many-headed hate Kafka Hydra that we're faced with these days. We all know what it is. AI is not AI. Machine learning is the probability prediction. It's the word calculator. Machine learning models becoming self-aware, this singularity that they've been pitching and hyping up, it's not happening, at least not within this architecture or anything remotely related to this architecture. A massive breakthrough needs to happen before Sam Altman's sweet, benevolent AGI is born. But they wouldn't want you to understand that. They want you to think that this is so much more than it is. So when these researchers are looking at the fact that people are essentially becoming dumbed down, losing some critical thinking faculties and capabilities, you would think, well, that's a bad side effect. My argument would be that the people who create these models, they're not dummies. Sociopaths, perhaps, likely. Dummies, unfortunately, no. Do you think that they do not understand that this is conditioning people to accept slop, to accept biased, shallow viewpoints? They see this not as a bug, but a wonderful, if not perhaps unintended feature of this technology, which just dovetails so beautifully in with what we're seeing right now. We're seeing this oligarchic takeover of governments across the world. Politicians, big tech billionaires aligning their goals and just making sure that they get a little more of the pot and just taking away a few more of the crumbs that the rest of us get. And AI is just another little piece of that puzzle. So while it's wonderful to have a little bit of validation and go like, yeah, using these tools is probably not helping you that much, the current existing crop of AI bros, well, I'm afraid there's a good chance your ship has already sailed, boys. There's still a chance. You're not beyond hope. But this isn't about you guys. This is going to be about the next generations, about younger people, about other people who thought maybe they had access to a cool tool that would help them to succeed when in reality it's doing exactly the opposite. And those are the people that I worry about. And we will stay vigilant here. It's about all I have for today. Much love and good luck in the wars to come, my friends.